Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Every now and again, I seem to do a story about casinos that don't want to pay up. And oftentimes, it's slot machines that malfunction. But here's a story James sent me out of MoneyWise. Chicago man won $800,000 at Midwest casinos, but they refused to pay. And what we're talking about here is bets placed on sports. Victoria Vasovsky wrote this. The man's name is Thomas McPeak. And he didn't stumble into a lucky streak. He says that he studied for it using science and math. 24-year-old from Chicago spent last year studying the world of sports betting, placing dozens of complex, high-risk wagers on football, which, of course, are parlays based on odds he believed he could beat. He says, it was a calculated attack where I thought I had an edge. In August, he went to the sports book at the Horseshoe Casino in Hammond, Indiana, owned by Caesars. To ensure his bets wouldn't be rejected, he remained anonymous, making multiple small bets at kiosks instead of a clerk at a counter. Now, here's something that does stand out to me. He even went so far as to disguise himself with sunglasses or hiding his hair. And now, if I was doing something that was 100% legit, I'd worry that doing that would make it look like I was up to something. But that's just me. Over 1 week, he says he bet $30,000 and he won $350,000. A month later, he went and employed the same strategies at another Caesars property in Bettendorf, Iowa. This time, he says the tickets added up to $450,000 in winnings. Now, it mentions here that to go to Iowa, he had to cross state lines, which sometimes is important to a story, okay? But I'm not sure about crossing state lines to go to a casino. Otherwise, Las Vegas would be dead. He says when he tried to cash in, both casinos voided his tickets, citing house rules and anti-money laundering policies. He says he's willing to sue to get his winnings. And I wish he would, because I'd like to see what happens. Because money laundering is something that many people suspect is done at casinos. So you walk in with a couple duffel bags of cash, convert them to chips, play around for a little while and convert your chips back out and walk out with cash. And so you did manage to exchange some money for some other money. So the man maintains that he played by the rules, but Caesars says he tried to circumvent them, particularly by crossing state lines. And they say that violates or can violate betting regulations. So the former casino executive who now teaches gaming at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, says, and this is somebody they interviewed, that Caesars was justified in voiding his tickets. The man says, I have a tough time finding sympathy for his case. But a seasoned betting expert and author that they also interviewed sides with the gambler, not because of how the bets were made, but because of Caesars' timing in voiding the bets. He argues that the casino only acted after realizing that the man might actually win. The clear answer is that Caesars owes this. So they found two experts. One says no, one says yes. The Indiana Gaming Commission says that Caesars followed its rules. So the regulators in Iowa are reviewing the man's complaint. Caesars has banned the man from playing at their casinos, but is willing to pay back the money he used to place the bets. Another casino in Michigan City, Indiana, also banned the man from playing at their casino after he won $127,000, but at least they paid him out first. So understand that Americans are now spending about $60 billion on commercial casino gaming and sports, and that's in 2022, up 14% from 2021. And I understand it's a couple years old, but sometimes this statistical stuff lags behind. So some wonder if the house plays fair when the odds shift in the bettor's favor. So for gamblers navigating the high-stakes world of sports betting, this man's case is a cautionary tale. And they suggest a few things here. One, they say read the fine print. Sports books include detailed rules in their terms and conditions, including the right to void wagers. So check out what those are. And you know, if it says in there, if you crossed a state line to come gamble here, we can void your wager. Well, I guess, unfortunately, you should take your business elsewhere. Keep your bets to one jurisdiction, because that'll avoid raising red flags and accusations of gaming the system. And then document everything as you go, from screenshots to transaction receipts. Keeping a trail could make or break your case if things get contested. So even if the odds are in your favor, The rule book might not be, especially with how they enforce it. So this to me is a little strange. And the one thing that we don't have in the story is what he did that gave him this edge. Because it says here he's talking about football. He's talking about football. And I know people who are sports fanatics who gamble. And they seem to win occasionally, but lose a lot. The more they gamble, the more they lose. And I'm not sure how you could study football and come up with something that is so surefire that it's going to beat the experts who set these bets up at these casinos. And I'd be curious to know how he does that. But what I'm guessing they're talking about here, which is the high-risk wagers and the parlays and so on, is that you're not just saying, hey, I think Michigan's going to beat Ohio. It's, I think Michigan's going to beat Ohio, Purdue's going to beat Penn State, and Stanford is going to beat Oklahoma State. And by the way, every single one of those games, the wins will be by double digits. And in every single one of those games, the coin toss will be heads. You know, they're combining a bunch of different things. I'm joking. I can't imagine that parlay exists, but maybe it does. You know, but quite often they'll have a bunch of things that are tied to each other. And I had a friend who gambled a lot, and he used to tell me these crazy things that, you know, if you pick the winners in these 3 games, what you'd get paid. And of course, what would happen is you pay and you bet and you win 2 games, but the third, so you lose. You know, and it's kind of like the financial instruments of mass destruction, where you could win a lot, but you could lose a lot too. And so I'm curious to know what he was doing, because if he was simply studying the games and learning them and figuring out who's going to win and doing it with such confidence that he can go in and win, he can find other places to gamble. Of course, the problem is that now that his name is out there, I'm sure that all the casinos have him on their watch list, and he probably can't gamble there anymore. But we've talked about this before, that the casino says, hey, we've determined that what you're doing is wrong. We're going to disqualify your wins. Notice that they wait until you win to disqualify you. They don't ever say, hey, we notice you're gambling and you're losing money, but you cross the state line to get here. We're going to give you your money back until you get the hell out. They don't do that. They don't do that. Same thing with the slot machine. When the slot machine finally pays off and they go, oh, it was a malfunction in the machine. It shouldn't have paid off. That's a mistake. And okay, so you're telling me that the time I win was a mistake, but all the times I lost, none of those were mistakes. None of those were mechanical errors. Never happens. Once in a while, just to create the illusion of fairness, they should occasionally walk up to somebody who's just lost their shirt and said, you know something, 6 bets back, you should have won, here's $10. They should, but they're not going to do that. But here, they're saying that by going in and doing things like crossing state lines to get there, he had broken the rules. And so, again, there's not a lot of detail in the story to see what else there might be, because that's the only rule they mention, really. And I don't know. Now, I do know that online gaming has become a huge thing, and a lot of online places offer the same things that the casinos do. So maybe the guy can go online and do it, unless, of course, they don't offer the crazy parlays and all that kind of stuff. So it's a crazy world sometimes. James, thanks for sending that from MoneyWise. Victoria Vasovsky wrote that. Chicago man won $800,000 at Midwest casinos, but they say they don't have to pay him. They're not going to. And he says he might file a lawsuit, so we'll see what happens. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. I haven't been everywhere, but it's on my list.